Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus saw the crowds and went up a hill. There he sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Happy are those who mourn. God will comfort them. Happy are those who are humble. They will receive what God has promised. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. God will satisfy them fully. Happy are those who are merciful to others. God will be merciful to them. Happy are the pure in heart. They will see God. Happy are those who work for peace. God will call them his children. Happy are those who are persecuted because they do what God requires. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Happy are you when people insult you and persecute you and tell all kinds of evil lies against you because you are my followers. Be happy and glad, for a great reward is kept for you in heaven. This is how the prophets who lived before you were persecuted. The Gospel of the Lord.
My dear people, there was a test which was carried out on two different categories of people. One type of people always looked at the positive side of life. They were the optimists who looked at everything in a positive way. And the other group was one which always interpreted everything very negatively, pessimists. And this was the test. Each of these groups were given a painting and a box which was closed and sealed. And their reactions were observed. The ones who were very positive took the canvas painting, looked at it, admired it, and looked up where to put it up, hang it on the wall, so that everyone would admire it. And then they took the box and they opened it up. And in the box were spoiled vegetables. Spoiled vegetables. And they looked at that and said, well, what should we do with this? And they all brought their heads together and said, let us make manure out of this for the garden. A positive thought came out. The other group, the pessimists, took the painting, they opened it, they looked at it, and they said, well, the color scheme is not very good. And it should have been done this way. So they kept it aside. It didn't look very attractive to them. And then they took the box and they opened it and they seen spoiled vegetables and they looked at it and said, what is wrong with these people? Why are they giving us all this? And they were upset and angry. You see, same situation, differently interpreted by different people. It's not what life brings before us that makes us happy or sad. It is our attitude towards events that makes us happy or sad. Life brings before us many events. Some are happy, joyful, some are challenging, some are sad. But it's how we look at these events that make us happy or sad. It's not these things in themselves. I was once called for a sick call to the hospital. The patient was a young lady who had been struck with cancer. She had been operated in her final stages. A number of chemotherapies already had gone. And I was called to give the sacrament to her. I walked into the room and I find this young lady on the bed giving a bright smile at me. A bright smile at me, and her face was glowing. And so I went in, I offered the sacrament, and after that, in the course of our conversation, I asked her, what is it that brings out such joy within you, even in the midst of this pain and trauma and suffering that you're going through? How can you smile and be so cheerful and so joyful? And she said, well, my sickness is physical. But when I look at those who enter this room, I see the pain and sadness in their faces. And I feel sad, and I do not want them to leave the room that way. I know that I have the capacity to change that. And so I radiate joy so that this joy can enter them. And when they leave this place, my suffering becomes less. My suffering becomes less. My pain becomes less when I see joy in them, happiness in them. My dear friends, the theme of today's Eucharist is rejoice and leap for joy. Many of you have come over here to thank the infant Jesus for all the favors that you have received, the prayers that you have made and have been granted over the years. And so you have come here with that joy. But there are many of you who have come over here with your own heaviness, bringing your petitions, with your struggles, asking the infant Jesus to help you all in the tough moments of life that you're going through. And one who's going through such a situation, it is difficult to be joyful and to rejoice. How can I be joyful when I'm going through this situation in life? And so, we need to reflect on this. You know, many people in the world are much more are in much deeper situations of stress and suffering than we are. And when we look at them, our sufferings fade off into the background. If we just think about it. A young man once went out of his house angry. Why? Because his economic situation at home was not so good, and his parents could not buy him a pair of studs which he wanted for his football match. And he was angry on his parents. He walked out, he sat at a bus stop, wishing that he had been born in a richer family. And as he sat there, depressed, sad and angry, he saw a man without legs, dragging himself on the footpath. And he realized how blessed he was indeed. Most of the time, we are caught up with our own struggles, and we think that these struggles are the biggest in the world. But we fail to realize that there are others who are suffering much more than us. And when we only realize this and become aware of this fact, we become aware of how much we have been blessed with. We have been blessed with so much that so many do not have. And so, my dear brothers and sisters, we need to become aware of this fact and glorify God for all that we have. for all that we have in our lives. When we experience love, our hearts are filled with love, and we radiate love in all that we do. Pope Francis, in his apostolic exhortations, "Rejoice and be glad," says, "Do not be afraid to be holy." Do not be afraid to be holy. What does he mean by this? Who is a holy person? A holy person is one who moves through life, through all the situations of life, with a certain joy within themselves, living in a state of joy always. The Beatitudes that we heard in the Gospel reading, all of them, each one of them, begin with the words, "Happy are those, blessed are those who mourn, who weep, who are merciful. Blessed and happy are the compassionate." This is a formula for being happy in life, in every situation, to be at peace with oneself in every situation. When I realize how blessed I am, my focus shifts from myself to others. The first reading tells us, "Rejoice in the Lord. Do not be anxious." When are we anxious? When we look at our own selves. When we look at our own selfish dreams. Our anxieties build up. When our expectations rise. Do not be anxious. Make your requests known to God. Trust in the Lord, and the peace of the Lord will be with you. This is the assurance that God gives us. When we open ourselves to the Lord, we open ourselves to one another. And when we open ourselves to one another and the Lord, we experience the joy of the Lord within us, no matter what the situation. We realize that we are blessed. And today, the infant Jesus calls us to be positive in life, to look at life positively, to interpret life positively. The Lord is blessing you at all times. Be aware that your situation, whatever you're going through, is not the worst. No, there are people in life who are going through worse situations than you. Count your blessings. And when you count your blessings, the joy within you will grow, and you will rejoice in the presence of the Lord. Offer your anxieties to the Lord and trust in the Lord, because God knows what's best for you. My dear brothers and sisters, this is the invitation for each one of us. And when we open ourselves to this, we will begin to live life to the fullest in the presence of God, in the love of God, rejoicing in every moment. No matter how the moment may come or present itself before us, we will always be happy and rejoice in His presence. So let us open ourselves to the Lord at this Eucharist, asking the Lord for His grace to always look at life positively and grow in His love. Amen.